this is, and then people even go so far as extreme as being like, this is bullying, which is really saddening to see. It must have been, if you kind of went to these feminist, the F word meetings and groups to kind of feel like, oh, these are my people, they're seeing things the way that I see, like, this is my community, this is my tribe, and then to actually realize that, you know, to be spoken to like that, like, that must have been incredibly, like, painful.
Yeah, I
because
felt very
you already
alone.
feel very isolated, and then to feel isolated from the group that's meant to not make you feel that way, that must have been very painful.
When I was at uni, I was the only feminist on campus, let's just say that. Like, it was isolating. I remember working on the student paper and talking about feminism to the overwhelmingly, like, male student paper staff. You know, you're all voluntary, everyone's doing it because they like to write. And I always used to get laughed at. And then I remember once going into the office and somebody had stuck up like images of page 3 girls and stuff. And so that was upsetting. Then you sort of like go into this situation where you're like, okay, people get it. People get it.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think IRL, like amongst like actual people in real life, like these environments were so amazing and supportive and incredible. And I also found myself involved in an activist group that was called Black Feminists, which was about, I would say like, now we would say like feminists of colour, to essentially discuss like issues to do with race and gender and feminism. But I would say that the biggest divisions I saw were mostly online, not offline.
Yeah.
Offline, it would happen in situations where like there'd be a large feminist gathering, then it split off into groups, and you know, I discuss this in the book. Somebody on the Black Feminist sign-up sheet wrote, why? Like, why is there a need for this, you know? So it'd be like super passive-aggressive, but online it would be much more aggressive and anger-inducing, you know, people confronting each other here, there, and everywhere. And I definitely felt alone, but I had an activist group full of women of colour feminists to retreat to and to meet, and that really got me through that period, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's some people who say, oh, why can't we all be humanists and in favour of the human race rather than feminists? And it's like, well, because there are specific things that happen to people because they are women, because society even views their behaviour as feminine. There's literally structural power attempting to marginalise the feminine out of society, back into the home, back into the kitchen. And like, there are also specific things that a power structure literally sets up to marginalise those who are not white, you know? That's why we need something. It's annoying to have to keep saying.
I know.
But here we are in 2018.
Here we are. But yeah, like, feminism is needed as a word because it addresses that there is a problem. And in order to solve a problem, it has to be visible. And without the word feminism, the problem becomes invisible again.
Absolutely.
And then there's nothing you can do. And same with race, same with...
It's just annoying when feminists can see one argument but not the other.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, wow, this is a real uphill struggle.
It's just like,
In fact, I'd say that the power dynamic is very similar, if not absolutely interlinked. So.
Yeah. Audre Lorde, the failure of academic feminists to recognise difference as a crucial strength is a failure to reach beyond the first patriarchal lesson. In our world, divide and conquer must become define and empower. That quote just blew my brain open, because I think I did have that anxiousness around, like, oh my God, well, if we're all going to be in these tiny factions, and if everyone's going to put a word in front of feminism, how are we all going to come together and solve the problem? Like, unity, we need to all be together, you know, like, you know, my brain like went off on that track. And then I read that quote and I was like, wow, actually, that's not where the strength lies at all. It's by understanding our differences, understanding the like subtlety and specificity of all of those differences that's going to make us really strong. For sure. I loved it. For sure. Yeah. Love Audre Lorde. So cool. What a babe. I'm going to do another Audre Lorde quote now as well. You end the feminism chapter with a quote: "Your silence will not protect you. Who wins when we don't speak? Not us. Do you have a guideline for when you decide to engage or when to walk away?" Okay, so I'm asked this a lot, and what I usually say to readers is if somebody is obviously being trolly or playing devil's advocate, which I personally don't believe in, because I think the devil is fine, like, doesn't need help, certainly doesn't need advocates, he's cool, is like, if you sort of
get that vibe from somebody, then just feel free to step away. And there's a kind of baiting that happens, you know, a baiting, which I feel that you can just be like, you know what, no thank you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like actually engaging, so I understand that it can be incredibly hard. Like I literally had to write a book of like 80,000 odd words in order to try and get across what I was trying to say in like Facebook paragraphs and like conversations at parties, you know, and things like that. So I would always say, if you want to engage, there are ways to do it that don't involve a literal face-to-face conversation to somebody who is like committed to denial and literally does not see the inequality in a situation. And that's why like films are amazing and books are amazing and culture is amazing. And sometimes people sort of say to me, oh, well, how could you have like written this book saying you're not going to talk to white people? Yeah, here you are. And I'm like, well, that's part of the process of writing a book. You have to actually go out into the world and discuss it with people. And I
love how they're like, I'm making such a smart, pulling out such a great point.
I think I've heard, like, if I had £1 for every time I'd heard that, you know, I'd have a pile of coins on my desk. I wouldn't be a millionaire, but I'd say like maybe 50 coins.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's good. Okay.
But for me, a way to engage in a productive way was to channel my anger and my research and my rage and all of my thoughts about it into an expressive endeavor.
Yeah.
And that's what I always say to readers in particular who are like, I don't know how to do this is so difficult, is channel it into something expressive and productive, whatever that might be for you. And sometimes, particularly when it's a friend, I say, you may need to get new friends. Yeah. Which is a sad thing to say, but it is the case, for sure.
One of the reasons I love the histories chapter of your book so much is that A, there was so much in there that I didn't learn in school, which we've already talked about, and B, it feels like one of the first steps to effectively fighting racism is to just own that history and acknowledge our complicity in it and our structurally racist society. As a nation, Britain has to confront this history. Do you see signs of us moving in that direction at all, of this being taught in schools? Like, are there any like glimmers of hope?
I checked, there's 2 petitions on the petitions.gov.uk website. Both are no longer live because they happened in the last government. So I used to say, oh yeah, there's a petition, sign it, but it's not live. So that's distressing.
That is distressing.
I think that like a situation that's emblematic of where Britain is with this conversation is something that happened to the University of Cambridge Student Union's women's officer at the end of last year. Her name was Lola Olufemi, black girl from North London, found herself studying at Cambridge. That's rare in itself. Yeah. And I think she was one of the people involved in writing a letter to the university saying, hey, for this particular course, let's decolonize the curriculum and consider engaging in like the perspectives of non-white authors, particularly, you know, those who have diverse perspectives. Let's include. She didn't say censor, she said let's include. And the nightmare that she endured, mostly from the British press. The Telegraph put a picture of her on the front page, somebody who's just graduated, about to start her life in the world.
And trying to find a job.
Exactly. Saying that she was forcing Cambridge to get rid of white authors. And she then endured a torrent of abuse because, you know, from strange people in the world who saw that headline. And it was a whole hoo-ha about a letter that she'd signed. And I think that's a really good, I mean, it's horrendous what happened to Lola. And personally, I think she should sue the Telegraph. But I think it's a good example of where Britain is with this conversation, which is when somebody tentatively says, hey, let's think about, you know, being a little bit more curious in this institution of higher education. They are absolutely slammed and socially punished. And I think that that's where, I don't know if we've developed past that at the moment. And that's really scary to me because this is higher education where students, you know, particularly with the government's higher education agenda since 2010, it's all been about like students with choice, you know, having choice to, you know, model what they want to learn. But when it comes to race, that's horribly slammed down, you know, and that's really scary to me. So, and I mean, imagine if a politician stood up and said, let's teach colonialism in schools. Yeah. I mean, there might be riots, you know, and that's really terrifying to me.
Yeah, yeah.
A cultural amnesia is happening at the moment, which is that like, what happened with colonialism is something. It's now something that's up for debate. So that's kind of like where we are in Britain. We're going to debate it. Was it good? Was it bad? I think that like last year there was this whole thing going on in like academia Twitter where people were annoyed because there were some arguments being put forward. Actually, colonialism was good, and it's like, and the country tried to move forward from that, and it's like, but at the moment we're like in this weird like debate place where it's like we're trying to debate whether or not this was good or bad, and it's not nuanced and it's not healthy, and it
feels really disconnected to me. It feels really like there's like this lack of connection to the tangibility, the realness of it as a thing. If it's being kind of debated in this